I'd like to welcome you to the AP Art History Review. I'm very excited about today. I have some really wonderful works to share with you, including 3 works that will be fair game for the AP test, and a couple that are works that you may not have seen yet. You'll notice here today we have a theme, Journeys of Transformation, works that either describe or cause transformation in some way. And it's a kind of a fun thematic way of linking together very different works. And if you look down at the bottom, learning objective, explain how purpose, intended audience, or patron affect artwork, affect art making. So we'll really think about what works of art are intended to do and how the circumstances affect that. Okay, I want to review your multiple choice question that Allison left you with yesterday. And as you can see, the multiple choice questions in art history they're not just one word answers. They're pretty complex where you have to read every answer very well. And then you really have to think it out because some of the distractors are often pretty tempting. But in this case, the correct answer is D, focus the attention of the viewer on a central line that represents societal divisions. I really loved the comparison of those 2 works yesterday. Okay, so today we talk about transformation, as I say, beginning with The Crossing, a work by Bill Viola in the Global Contemporary set. Then we will review other works that share this theme and do some practice. So imagine yourself in a gallery that's totally black, and there's a 16-foot tall screen with this projected video. And that is The Crossing by Bill Viola, a wonderful artist who uses new technology to make very thoughtful works that almost can provoke meditative thoughts sometimes, or I would say cosmic thoughts almost. So if I ask you the question, what is the meaning of life? Bill Viola is an artist who wrestles with that. And here you can kind of see that you're in the gallery, how large this screen is. And the really interesting thing is there's a show going on the back side of it. So this is the water side, and the back side is the fire side. I'm going to show a little bit of this installation in just a minute on YouTube if I can. So when Bill Viola, he's in college, he studied religions, and he studied engineering, and he studied psychology. He somehow brought all these together in his art career. And so as you see there, the film is resolved amazingly high because he's shooting so much film, filming so fast, and then it's reduced to this extreme slow motion. And so it has this really gorgeous, sumptuous look to it. And Bill Viola invites us to contemplate these heavy questions. When he was a younger man, he lived in Italy for 2 years and got really interested in the mysticism, the Catholic Church, and altarpieces and things like that. And then he ended up doing some works that reference resurrection and things like that. So, but Bill Viola always drills down to these very elemental things as opposed to, iconography that's specific to a religion. He's very interested in Hinduism and Buddhism as well. And so Bill Viola also, it's not like a film that you're used to engaging your attention. It's very hypnotic. The things happen slowly in a Bill Viola film. And if your interest is piqued by this artist, what I recommend you do is go onto YouTube. Some of you are stuck at home. You have time to watch YouTube. There's a lot of Bill Viola projects available to watch on YouTube. And he's very, very interesting. And so I'm going to now attempt to share my screen with you and show a little bit of Bill Viola. Okay, Bill Viola on YouTube. And this is the crossing. This is about a 2-minute film.
Hey John, we are not seeing the video, so if you could try resharing that.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm do you see it now?
Yeah, looking good, thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that. And once again, I encourage you to go online and see the other Bill Violas that are available. Oops, I hear one of them there right now.
Yeah, we'll probably want to cancel that YouTube. There we go. It's all good now.
And I'm going to all right. Now, hopefully you can all right. So there is, you got to see it, and I really wanted to show it. I realized that we had some technical difficulties, but I was wondering about this, the geniuses of the past, the artistic geniuses of the past. Would they have embraced things like film and electronic media? I always like to ask students, what would a film done by Michelangelo or Rembrandt look like? Kind of a fun idea. And it's one of the wonderful things about the Global Contemporary set. You have Cindy Sherman making giant Cibachrome prints, you have Namjoon Pike making a huge sculpture out of televisions. So I really recommend that you explore this set, even though we won't have time in the reviews to do it. Now, this is another work, and I'm hoping I put it up with no title. So I'm hoping you look at it and you go, well, it looks a lot like our transformation mask. Okay, because that is what we are looking at right now. This is the work from your set, the transformation mask from the Northwest Quiutal tribe. You have to forgive my pronunciation of that. And made from wood, paint, and string. And this is a ceremonial object. It's a mask that has an outside and an inside. So if I go to the screenshot from the course, you'll see the outside is the raven or the bird, and then it flips open. You work that by strings. In other words, you pull on strings and it flips open. This is a way for, during the ceremony to access ancestral spirits and supernatural being. They are embodied through the dancing or the performance of this mask. I can kind of think of it like if you want to access some energies of your ancestors. We may not think of that often, but I'll give you an example of like my grandfather was in World War I, and he had to be very brave. So maybe if I wanted to summon up some courage one day, I would think, oh, I'll just be like my grandfather. And so here's some contextual things for you about the transformation mask. And if you look at the second one there on the festivals, there's a certain type of festival called a potlatch. And a potlatch is, it's a very nice festival to get invited to, because at the potlatch, whoever throws the potlatch gives away huge amounts of gifts. And so you could be guaranteed of coming away with a gift. But they are very interesting ceremonies, and you could see that prestige of the mask, and very, very important. So here's a very nice contextual photo that shows the man wearing the mask. And we don't know how big these masks are until we see this photo, and they can be really incredibly huge. It seems like it would weigh you down. Here's some other contextual photos as well. Formally, the works tend to have bilateral symmetry. They have a certain color palette that is characteristic, but the production of the mask did change once there was contact with the West, with Europeans and Americans that came in and traded with the Northwest tribes. And then you could see that there's really quite a variety. I go to lots of museums, and I always look at the different ones they have. They're pretty common. And then this is nice because it has a sort of what it would look like on a person wearing it. And so when you get to see a ceremony like this, as I say, the ancestor emerges as you tune into the energy of this ancestor. I really like this one because it just has a slightly more primitive look to it. And it just reminds you that when we have an image in the set, why was that one chosen over others? A lot of times it's because of connoisseurship, that it's a very good example of a particular one. But there's lots of transformation masks out there. So I'd like you to think about the artist who makes this and the things that would inspire the imagery, and also what are the constraints on the artist. In other words, I'm going to give you a minute to think of this or write it down. Okay. All right. So, today we're used to, especially with global contemporary art, having artists that sort of do what they want to. Their work is sold through the gallery system, but it's always important to remember that artists like this, especially a traditional artist, traditional Native American artist, would be very constrained in their what they wanted to make by the color palette, the materials available, the demands of the audience, the clan of that particular group of people. There was the different clans, different animal clans, and so here we have it. Now this work, hopefully you see that it's like another work you studied. It's not the exact one. I'm hoping, because we always have to attribute works sometimes on the AP test, and I'm hoping that you say, oh, this is a Bundu mask. The Bundu mask, it sometimes goes by Soe, which means the spirit mask. That's just a screenshot from your course description. And I'd like to get these words straight, because for me, when I started studying the African material, all the different words I would get mixed up. So if you say Mende, Sande, Bundu, that's going from the large group of people, the Mende people, and the Sande would be like a society, a certain society. That could be like a, in our world, it could be like a fraternity or a club or a group that you belong to. And the Sunday Society was in charge of the education of young women and the transition of a girl into being a woman in the society. And then the Bundu is the name of the mask, a Bundu mask. Bundu masks are danced once again and used in ceremonies, and they convey values of that they're teaching to the young women. Here you can see a couple more. So I want you to look at them and you say, well, what do they have in common? What are some of the commonalities of them? Visual. So you're doing a little visual analysis here, and hopefully you see that the mouths are small, the eyes are sort of downcast. There's different features. The rings around the neck, talk about those in a minute, are important. Here is a nice map showing the location of the Mende peoples. And it's important to see that these masks represent idealized beauty from this group of people. And if you think of another example of idealized beauty, I shared it with you on Monday, and that would be the Venus of Urbino from Renaissance Italy. But in this case, with the Mende people, ideal beauty includes how they act. Okay, so if these are some of the features, a large forehead would promote intelligence. A small mouth would indicate, you don't open your mouth a lot to gossip. Downcast eyes would be humility and not, paying attention to what you're supposed to. The neck rolls I find really interesting because, neck rolls could allude to fat, and you have to have a certain amount of fat to be able to bear children. And so the fertility or the ability to bear children would be an important feature. And then there's a second interpretation that's very interesting, and it's the neck rolls echo the bands on a chrysalis, a cocoon, before the butterfly emerges. And just like a young person emerges as an adult. So that's a nice double meaning of that piece. By the way, there's a wonderful smart history session on Bundu mask. If you haven't seen it, you get to see some of the ceremony, which I have pictures here. So you can see here that there's a question about what takes place in your family and community. I personally have experienced, bas mitzvahs and quinceañeras, things like that. So different societies have different ways of passing on and observing the transition, the transformation from children to adulthood. And of course, I think one of them is graduation. And I know some of you are going to be having an unusual types of graduation this year. Okay, now this is a work from the Asia set. Some of you got to do the Asia unit already, but a lot of people didn't do it. And the College Board really wants us to cover a couple of these wonderful Asian works. This is a Hindu work. And a lot of times we say, well, is it a type of work that's common or is it unique? But if I just show you, I'm gonna go through these, and you'll see that there's lots of these in India. They're common, and there you see the object in procession or in parade, and we know that a lot of times statues are done that way. And when it's in procession, it's garlanded, and there's sometimes candles. It's draped with very beautiful fabric. And so this is the Shiva as Lord of the Dance, Shiva being one of the main Hindu gods. And it's from the Chola Dynasty, which was 11th century CE. Chola Dynasty work is very famous for their bronzes. One time a woman brought in a cast bronze of this size into my classroom. And although it was about 2 feet high, we were surprised at how heavy it was and how hard it was to pick up. And you know that you have other cast bronze works in your set. And so this is a really wonderful piece. And if you're to go on the internet and just look at Chola Dynasty bronzes, you'll see quite a variety of works. So let's talk a little bit about the iconography of this work. Shiva is in charge of destruction, okay, destroying through and also at the same time of regeneration. So Shiva is a god that perpetuates change through life, death and rebirth, destruction and rebuilding. And so there's some very nice iconography on this. If you look at what's in the hands, in one hand, there's a drum. You know, I say, well, the drum could be seen as the heartbeat coming back. And then there's fire involved. And you could see he's actually in this ring of fire. And so that's called a nimbus. So the earth can burn up and then it can be regenerated. And there's also this dwarf, I think I went to it there, that the Shiva's dancing on top of this dwarf, the dwarf Apasmara rather, and it's symbolic of ignorance. So there's very much do not be afraid here. One of the hand signs, by the way, there's more than 2 arms as you see. One of the hand signs is do not be afraid. Trust in this cycle of perpetual change, death, and rebirth. So it's kind of a cosmic idea. And it relates back to the Bill Viola, who is very interested in this image and very interested in Hindu religion as well. Okay. Shiva also has these ideal proportions that we've seen in other cultures. And a lot of people look at this lithe body and think it's a woman, but Shiva's a man, but a very kind of ballet dancer type of man who is very lithe. Our last work for today is, hopefully you identify it from this picture, The Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson. It is also a work that is involved with transformation. And in this particular case, it tells about transformation and it itself becomes transformed. The Spiral Jetty is like a clock telling time, but the time it tells is geological time. There's a picture of Robert Smithson when he was very young, living in New York. And when he was in art school, he had these religious paintings. And this one's a drawing actually called The Feet of Jesus. And you can see that he has a spiral obsession, even going back into these religious paintings. So there's lots of layers of meaning in this. So when Smithson gets the idea of geology and the time of the Earth's time, he finds a piece of land on the Great Salt Lake, and this is what it looks like driving out there. Believe me, you don't want to get lost. It's very confusing out there, and there's lots of little forks in the road. It also happens to be near a place called the Golden Spike, just in case you've heard of that from your history class, where the railroad was going from both coasts and it met right there. And so there is Smithson surveying the land, and his girlfriend, Nancy Holt, and wife, I should say, was also an earth artist who has really interesting earth art works, as Smithson does. So here is the identification for Spiral Jetty. You could see it's a work made of earth, made with a bulldozer. And it's also kind of managed by the DF Center for the Arts. This picture was right after it was made. It's had a lot of transformation since that time. The only earthwork that could be seen from space. Okay, so they planned, and then they got it done in about 2 weeks. Here are Robert Smithson's drawings for the design. It was very important to him that it was in salt water. And in this particular part of the Salt Lake, you can see that the water is, well, if I go back here, the water has that reddish tinge. That's from algae that is related to brine shrimp that are in that area. And he cared about that red, salty water, and it had a relationship to the amniotic fluid of the fetus in the womb. So there's lots of depth and meaning in this work, even though it's a work of rocks that you can walk on top of. When you get to the end of the jetty spiraling around, you look out at defunct oil derricks and abandoned oil equipment. And it was like Smithson was saying, man came and tried to extract the minerals and couldn't do it, and threw down his stuff and left. And it's really a comparing of the amount of time of humans on the earth is so small compared to the big picture of geological time. So there's a nice picture really showing how red that water is. And of course, when this work was done, Smithson got in a plane and filmed it from the air. And those films are very important. You can see those on YouTube as well, because the jetty itself started to change. So we'll see in a minute. So in 1970 was the first year they had Earth Day. And that was the year that Spiral Jetty was made. So I want you to just remember that this consciousness about the earth, about the environment, the importance of the earth came out at that time. And this idea of, I don't want people to come and see my work in galleries. I want people to go out to it and experience it, walk on it. It was a revolt against the idea that, galleries could buy and sell works, and that art had become this big commodity that people were making money on and things like this. People could almost play the art market like the stock market. So in the 1970s, the lake started to rise and the climate was changing, and the jetty started to disappear. At first, the Dia Foundation was like, we should fix this or something, or pile more rocks on. But Smithson's idea was to let nature take its course. And so one of the founding or the central ideas of the work was entropy. If you've taken physics, you know that entropy refers to the dissolution of a system, a sort of a slow unraveling of a system. And so there you can see a very nice picture of the jetty going just underwater. And then after some time went by, it came back because there was a drought. And when it reappeared, it was coated with salt crystals. And in a really wonderful moment, they realized, well, maybe Smithson knew it all along, that salt, if you look at the molecular structure, evidently it has a crystalline, a spiral form in the molecular structure. I have not actually seen that, but chemistry experts have told me about this. So now the jetty is quite dry. When I went there, there was puddles of water around it. But you almost wonder if it's going to get buried or taken away. Smithson knew that the jetty would erode and degrade over time, but he just didn't know that it would happen so fast. And by the way, there's other earth arts that Smithson did. He was really interested in sites that were sort of rejected sites or abandoned sites, sites that weren't thought of as scenic and beautiful that tourists would flock to. He was interested in rehabilitating places and sites. Now, tragically, when Smithson was quite young, he was killed in a small plane crash while planning another earthwork. And I always wonder what he would have gone on to do. The spiral itself is an ancient symbol. We can find it in many cultures, including on the great stupa at Sanchi, which is one of the works in your image set. And here we can see a nice photo. There's photos and film of the jetty. The only work that can be seen from space. And then I'm going to put my pointer right in this area is the defunct oil equipment. That was really important to Smithson, that equipment was related to the jetty, the fact that man abandoned this stuff and there's this jetty. It's like a beautiful gesture. This is my question to you. Is the work like a prayer or a poem or a question? Would you explain it as spiritual or scientific? I was thinking of these questions last night, and of course there's no right answer, but the one thing that kept popping into my mind is the work is magical. So I think you can enjoy it for that. And it's transformed in a very short amount of years. Geological time, of course, I looked in on it last night. Human beings have been around for about 2 million years or so, but the Earth is 4.54 billion years old. So I know that when I took geology, I really have my eyes open. So when you go to college, definitely take a geology class. It gives a different perspective of what time is. And just in case I'm getting too heavy for you, I will say that the jetty would be a nice place to propose marriage to someone or ask them to go to the prom. Okay, so today our takeaways, we've introduced you to Bill Viola, a wonderful artist, and I hope you get right on YouTube and watch some other pieces by Bill Viola. We've seen works that involve transformation in some way. Either they describe transformation or they initiate transformation, the transformation of children to adults, or the transformation of a dancer to an ancestor. And so it's a very nice theme. What I'd leave you with for a practice, some things to think about. Explain two aspects of Robert Smithson's intent in creation of Spiral Jetty, and then compare how both Smithson and Bill Viola address the element of time. And tomorrow, when you talk to Allison, she will talk about some possibilities in this practice. Remember that if you have trouble with internet access wherever you are, that's going to be an important thing for your AP test. And I will always put this up, cb.org/tech. This is John Gunnan signing off from the West Coast. Until next time.